right now in this time in my life, my son is going through his own stuff and hates me at this point in time and won't have anything to do with me, won't let me have anything to do with my granddaughter. And it's because of my past and the mistakes that I made.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, as much as you're comfortable with and want to talk about? You know, as far back as you want to go, and as
Well, I'm an
deep
open
as you want to
book.
get.
I'm an open book. Okay. So I am 52 years old. I'm in recovery. I will be in I'll have 18 years clean and sober in December the 9th. I was on drugs for a long time, a lot of childhood trauma, and then, just used drugs as an escape, really, and found my way to the Love Lady Center in 2007. And did not even, when I give my testimony, I joke and say, I, I ran so far away from God that I accidentally ran smack into him in the halls at the Love Lady Center. But he radically got a hold of my life. And I was just, going there to get off drugs. Wasn't, I didn't really even have an idea of what I was doing. I just knew I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And he just radically gave me a life that I never expected. I mean, like,
when you went into Love Lady, was it like a drastic change, or did you have moments here and there where you, because I can't remember your testimony. It's been so long.
So I was not a, like, certain people, like Wendy Caps, like when she came in, she was like a perfect angel, never broke any of the rules. When I came in, I had a mohawk and I blew the doors wide open in 2007, and I broke every rule they had and even helped them form some rules because of some of the stuff I did that weren't rules yet. I was hell on wheels, and that's why Melinda always gave me a lot of the troublemakers or behavior problems, because at one time I was a behavior problem. That's how I know that he's real, and that if he'll do it for me, he'll do it for anybody, because I was jacked up all the way up. I was molested as a kid. I finally admitted it, when I was a teenager. I was called a liar and made to apologize. Never really felt loved. Um, a huge mother wound, father wound. Father was never there. Um, just jacked up, dysfunction. We put the fun in dysfunctional in my family. And, as an adult now, especially since Roger died, once Roger died, I started doing some. I ended up in a year later after Roger died, I ended up in an abusive relationship, which led me back to Jesus, because when Roger died, I was so upset and disappointed in God because of how he died and how he allowed him to go out of this world. And that I couldn't pray. I couldn't, lean into him the way I needed to after losing my husband. And I ended up in this god awful relationship with this man a year later, which when I had bruises all over me. I was just absolutely abused in every way you can abuse a person. And he broke me so bad to where I had no choice but to run back to God. And it wasn't like I quit believing or anything. I was just upset. I was upset with God. I felt like in my, darkest moment, I don't know about darkest, but in my worst moment, he just stood there and watched us, break, is what I felt at that time. And so I had no choice but to run back to God, because I was so absolutely, utterly devastated and broken after this. And so what I've done is I've started going to therapy. I've done biblical counseling, and I've, all the things that I thought over the years, oh, that's just my quirky personality. No, it's trauma. That's what it is. It's absolutely trauma, childhood trauma. What is childhood? It's what we spend the rest of our lives trying to overcome.
So
Yeah.
on the note of Roger, what you move that phone?
I found. Oh,
What's the story with Roger? When'd you meet? How'd you meet?
that was such a good story.
How I know you already know.
I know. I love it.
I know some of it,
I love it.
but
You want to know something really amazing?
yeah.
Today's his
Is
birthday.
it really? That is so awesome.
He would, yeah, he would have been 53 today.
Oh, makes me want
So
to cry.
I was at the Love Lady Center. Yes, happy birthday. That's why this is so there's no coincidences where God's
Yeah.
concerned. But so I was in the program at the Love Lady Center. This a girl I had made friends with, her name was Melissa Pierce at the time, and she was dating Roger's brother, Randy. And she said, so my boyfriend and his brother and his wife are coming to church tomorrow. His brother's going to preach. Do you want to sit with us and meet my friends? And I was like, sure. And so they came the next morning, and I met Randy and Roger and Roger's wife. And um, it was just a normal meeting your friends, family. And the music started, and we were worshiping. And I've always loved worship. It's always been my favorite part. And the Lord said, open your eyes. So I opened my eyes, and there he was standing right in front of me. The guy I had just met with his wife. Well, his arms were in the air, and he was worshiping like I've never seen a man worship. And he had tears streaming down his face, and you could tell there was nobody in that room but him and Jesus in that moment. And I had never seen a man so sold out for Jesus. And I don't care what the person next to me is thinking. I'm a man. I'm as manly as they come, and I've got tears streaming down my face, and it's okay. And I've never been like a homewrecker, so it wasn't like that kind of situation. It was like, wow. And I told God in that moment, when you bless me with a godly man, because I know you're going to, I want one just like that. Because he was covered in tattoos, and he was sold out for Jesus. His nickname was Jesus Freak. And Melissa and Randy ended up getting married. They both worked at the center for a decade, if not longer. And Melissa and Randy and I ended up becoming roommates in a grad house at one point. And I knew them. I knew Roger and his wife. Roger was over the Celebrate Recovery in Sylacauga. I started the Holy Fire drama team at the Love Lady Center with Holly Haynes. And then this girl came on to my caseload and eventually got onto my drama team and eventually became my assistant. And her name was Christy Steele. And she said, she was from Sylacauga. And she said, I want to go to and we were going to 180 to Celebrate Recovery. And well, it started off at Clear Branch and then 180 when it moved to 180. And we would go with Gresh, the preacher, and we would go all over the place. And he would tell people about Celebrate Recovery, or he would just go to speak, and he would take the Holy Fire drama team with him. And we would do human videos, and we would do praise dances, and we were all over the place. And so Christy says to me one day, hey, I want to do this at my Celebrate Recovery in Sylacauga. And I was like, okay, well, put me in touch with the leader of your CR, which was Roger Martin. And so we talked, and we got it all worked out. And Holy Fire went with Christy the first time, and she gave her testimony, and we performed. And then somebody stood up in the middle of the service and was like, I want to go back. I want to go back with y'all. Can y'all take me with you? So I was like, yeah, let me call Melinda. So I called Melinda, and we went back and brought her with us. And then every time we went out there, we brought somebody home. Then Roger had this big celebration Saturday in 2010 in the park, and it was an all day affair. He had a stage out there, and there were different worship bands playing, and in between the musicians setting up and tearing down their stuff, they would give like mini testimonies. And then we did 5 dramas that day. And so he'd have like a drama, mini testimony, then some music, then a drama, and the Teen Challenge guys drama team was there too. And so we knew each other, in ministry. Like we ran in the same circles. We knew each other. I went there, I don't know how many times, with different people to, give testimonies or for us to perform. And I always, remembered him as the one that God showed me, because I felt like God showed me him in that moment, not necessarily to show me him, but to show me what
Mhm.
it looked like, to show me what a godly man looked like, because I had not honestly ever seen one for real. Um, So the day that I had quit working at the center because I was going through a season where I needed more money, and I was working at this doctor's office down the road in downtown, and I got off at 4, whereas they got off at 5 at the center. And uh, I saw on because we were friends on Facebook, and it was him. It was his first name and his wife's first name and their last name. They had a joint Facebook, and so the day that I saw it go from Roger and Nikki Martin to Roger Martin, I was like,
Hello.
that's interesting. And so I got in my car when I got off at 4, and I drove to the Love Lady Center, and I sat down at Melissa's desk and I said, so I noticed today that Roger and Nikki's Facebook went to just Roger. What's going on? Is he okay? Because he had had a lot of health problems, and we had all been praying for him and everything. And like I said, we were friends. We knew each other. So she was like, "Oh, it's this terrible story. They had this horrible situation, and she had done him wrong, like really wrong, and during his health problems, and it was a terrible story." And I remember I looked at Melissa and I said, that's an awful story, friend. And I felt it, like the hairs stood up on my arm. And when I left out of there, I was headed to the car to get on my phone to, I don't know what I was going to do something. And all I could hear was the Lord tell me, be still, be still. And I was just like, oh, Lord, that's that man. That's that man. That's that one you showed me that day, and I thought you were showing him to me to show me what a
As an
godly man
example,
looked
yeah.
like. But now he's yeah, as an example. But now he's not married. Now he's divorced, and uh, I want that preacher man because I mean, that's who he was. And I would the Lord would not let me say anything, though. He kept telling me to be still, and I'm so not good at being still. And so I noticed that every time I posted something on Facebook, he would comment or like it. And so I would post stuff just to see, and he would. And we were flirting back and forth on Facebook, and I kept wanting to message him, and the Lord was like, no, be still. And I thought he was being still, he was telling me to be still just because I'm very forward, and I'm very blunt, and I don't hold back. I'm not one that you ever wonder what I'm thinking. And so, what happened though is that when he got a divorce, he had fallen, and nobody really knew it. But all I knew is that I wanted that man, and he was available. So one day on the way to work, Melissa called, and me and Melissa were friends, but we weren't like talk on the phone friends. And so she called me at 7:30 in the morning one morning, and I was like, "Ugh, this is Melissa. This has got to be about Roger." So I answered the phone, and I was like, "Hello." And I had made several comments, about he sure is cute, da 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 da. Da. And it was Melissa on the phone, and I answered it, and I was like, hello. And she's like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm on my way to work. What are you doing? And she's like, about the same. And I was like, well, what's this about? And she was like, well, Randy's brother Roger wants to go out with you. And I was like, yes, yes, I knew it. I knew it. I knew that man was supposed to be mine. And by the time I got into work to really, tell somebody about it, I had looked down, and he was in my messenger, and told me that he'd always admired me, and, thought a lot of me, and wanted to get to know me better if that was something I would be interested in. And I was like, oh, yes, I'm definitely interested in that. And our first date was at church at the sanctuary in Sylacauga, and then our second date was to celebrate recovery at 180. And the second date that we had, I knew that he was going to be my husband. At that point in time, I had made T-shirts, and it said it was for a. This was in 2014, and Halloween just happened to fall on a Friday, and that's when we have Celebrate Recovery. And we were doing this super secular drama, and most of our dramas, the Lord wins and saves everybody, but this drama on this day, because it was Halloween, it was kind of like well, this is what's going to happen if you don't get it right. And it was to the song Too Late to Apologize, I think I think Timberlake or
Oh
One
yeah, yeah,
Republic or
One
I don't know,
Republic.
something like that. And so it's basically a story. It's a skit in the beginning, and then it Satan comes out and takes takes
Mm-hmm.
people to hell basically. And I made these shirts, and on the front it's a black shirt. On the front it said Jesus. On the back it had a scripture about going out into all the nations and making disciples, and it said, "Friends don't let friends go to hell." So I had that on when he showed up to pick me up, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, I love your shirt." I was like, "Thanks." And he said, "Where did you get that?" And I said, I had it made. I've got a whole suitcase of them." And he was like, "Can I, do you have one of my size?" I was like, "I'm sure I do. What do you wear?" And he told me, and I went to go get it out of the suitcase, and I handed it to him, and he said, "You have to know I'm super cheesy and I'm a hopeless romantic." Um, he said, "Would it bother you if I put it on and matched you?"
Oh.
And I was like, he said, "Do you have a bathroom so I could change?" And I was like, "Yes, husband, the bathroom is right over there." I didn't say husband, but I was thinking it. But he changed into that shirt, and we matched, and that was the first of many matching shirts that we had and wore together. And that night, he told me he didn't want to see anybody else, and it was on and popping from there. We were married not once but twice, because the first time I should have listened when God said be still, but I didn't, because he was using, and things started happening, and things that were all too familiar. And I was like, I feel like he's using, and I would talk to Melissa and Randy, and they're like, "No, no, he's not using, he was using." And it just, fell apart. And then I didn't talk to him for 9 months. Walking away from him I tried everything I could think of. I mean, I tried everything I could think of. But as you well know, you can't want it. You can't want someone into getting
Mm-hmm.
it. It has to be them that wants it. And so at after, at some point in time, even when you believe someone is the love of your life, and that it was God ordained, and all of those things, because I knew that about him. At some point in time, you have to say enough is enough. I'm not going to continue to let you walk all over me and hurt me just because I love you, because I
Mm-hmm.
love me too. And so I had to basically give him an ultimatum, like, "You're either going to get clean, or I have to walk away." And he wasn't done yet, so I had to walk away. And it broke me. I mean, it broke my heart. And walking away from him was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life at that time. And I didn't talk to him for 9 months, and then he reached out to me, and he was like, "Look, I know that out of all the people in this world, like, you owe me nothing, but I know that you're the one person in this world that will help me. And if I don't get some help, I'm going to die out here. And can you please get me into rehab?" And I said, "I've only got one really good string to pull for you, and that's Turning Point in Thorsby. And, it's really expensive to get in there, but Brenda will pull the strings and make it happen if you're truly done. If you're not done, tell me, because I don't want to send you there and you
Yeah.
screw it up. So I need you to tell me, like, if you're really, really done, or you're just tired or whatever." And he's like, "No, I'm done. I'm done." And so I called Brenda, and she told me to go get him and put him on my couch. And my roommate, Carrie Baskin, who is a client rep at the Love Lady now, and she said, I called her, and I said, and mind you, I wasn't working for the Love Lady at that point in time, nor was I living in Love Lady housing. But I called Carrie, and I said, "Look, I just want you to know this is what happened. I called Miss Brenda. Miss Brenda said to go get him and put him on my couch for the weekend. It was Easter weekend, 2016. And I'm going to take him to rehab on Monday." And she was like, "Why is he going on our couch?" And I said, "Well, that's what Miss Brenda told me to do." And she's like, "You don't work for her, nor do you live in Love Lady housing. You don't have to listen to what she says." And I was like, "Oh, yes, I do. It's Miss Brenda." I just really wanted him on my couch. You know what I mean? I didn't want to take him anywhere else. So I made him go to church with me Easter weekend. And then I took him to rehab on Monday. And I was just like, "Okay, well, you know, I hope, that it works out, and I hope you get, back to the foot of the cross." And I was trying so hard not to just,
Mm-hmm.
melt and fall, into a little puddle of holly in his hands. Because that's not what he needed in that moment. He didn't need to focus on me. He needed to focus on Jesus. because we weren't going to find our way back to each other unless he found his way to Jesus first. And I'd done it the wrong way the first time. And so I was determined that I was going to let God make a man out of him before I tried to make a husband out of him again. And that's exactly what happened. And the day he graduated, we got remarried.
So what?
And we did everything right that time. We waited until marriage. We followed it to the letter, and it was the time. It was his time.
So what? I guess
And
kind of backtracking a little bit. Was there when you kind of got the notion that he was using again? Did you kind of have like a denial period of like, I know it, but I don't want to admit it, or were you kind of like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, for sure. There's certain things that are in the dope world, and because you've been
Mm-hmm.
there. And when people were knocking on the bedroom window at 3 a.m. talking about a computer, I was just like,
wait a minute,
yeah, this is not normal. Normal people are not up at 3 a.m. knocking on
Yeah.
somebody's
yeah,
window
yeah.
for
That's
anything,
like when
and different things. Just no, it didn't add up, and it was. You can hide things like that for a certain
Mhm.
amount of time, but eventually it
Yeah.
takes over.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that's like when you were gone last summer when my brother was staying with me. My brother that just passed away, he stayed with me last summer. And we told him when he moved in, we said, you can't, the only rule is you cannot start using again, because he was in recovery too. And we were
Yeah,
like, you can't do that. We got the kids in the house. I'm in recovery. I don't need to be around that. And he's like, no, I would never do that. All these things. And he actually joined the army last year, and there was a whole bunch of medical stuff that happened, and he had to get medically discharged. But he was still in basic, and I was writing him letters, and I'll talk on the phone with him. I'm like, I'm telling you, he's using again. I'm like, he's gone all hours of the night, and when he does come home, it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I could see him on the Ring camera, just how he's bouncing around on the Ring camera trying to get in the house.
Mhm.
So I got to where I just started locking the bottom lock too, because he had the code to get in, but I wasn't letting him come in that way. And his last time that he was there, it really all set in for me, because he came home around 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and he had a gun in his hand and was telling me that, and I had my youngest daughter with me at the time, Mira. I was holding her, because she had woken up when he came there, and he's holding it around and talking about that the cops were following him and that these people are after him, and that, like, waving it around saying that he's done with everybody. And I was just like, no. So I
Yeah,
told him over the next couple of days, I said, you got to go. I said, I love you, but
yeah,
I can't, because I had already asked him if he was using again, and he wouldn't tell me. And I
yeah,
said to him, I said, if you are, just tell me. I'm not going to be mad. I said, I need to know. And he never would tell me that he was. No, but like everybody acted like I was just crazy, and I'm just like, okay. And then sure enough,
yeah,
I was right. I found out later that he was in fact still using, and I was like, well, he can't come back around.
So if
yeah. Well, and I think too, the people that he would introduce me to, you
Mm-hmm.
you could take one look at somebody and tell when they're
Yep.
all strung out. And I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
these are not people that I want to have
No,
anything to do with or associate with. Like, what are you doing associating with
exactly.
them? And then I just, he was lying about different stuff, and I had consistently been going to Melissa and Randy saying, hey, something's not adding up, I don't think it's right, and they kept saying no, no, no. And then one day they called me and told me to come by, and I came by, and they were like, I think you're right. And I was like, yeah, I'm afraid I am too.
so in your life, in your story, what was the introduction to your addiction, if you want to share?
So yeah, no, that's fine. In the 8th grade, I was introduced to marijuana and alcohol, and I was wild waiting to happen. My parents were super, super strict. My stepfather was in the Green Beret. We were at church every time the doors were open. I mean, I had to, and in eighth grade, I had to, in the morning when I would get ready for school, I would listen to the radio while putting on my makeup and doing my hair. And then I would have to roll the dial back to the Christian radio station before I turned my radio off, because my mother would go in there and flip it on to make sure I wasn't listening to secular music. Like, they were super, super strict. And I think when you're too strict on your kids like that, they
Yeah.
go
Yep.
buck wild. And I feel like that's what happened. I when I moved from here to Texas. I went to high school in Houston. I didn't really do they weren't really into like smoking weed and stuff. I did smoke weed one time while I was out there. I drank like a lot. Drank a lot in high school, and then um was exposed to acid by a friend, did it a couple of times. Wasn't like something I absolutely loved. It was just something that I did a few times, and then came back here, got pregnant, got married, got a divorce. Had been to a couple of bars because I'd recently, just turned 21. And then I met this guy. Isn't that how I feel like all of our
Yep.
stories start? I either met this guy or I met this girl. But I had started dating this guy, and um, he did drugs, and I knew he did drugs, and I really didn't do drugs other than smoking weed, which I didn't
Really count
really
that.
count that as much of anything. Yeah. And I really didn't care for it, honestly. I don't know why I did it for as long as I did, but he would come home on like cocaine and all these different things, and it never looked like it was any fun until one night he came to my house, and we were supposed to be going to the club, and he was rolling. And I was like, now that looks
Mhm.
different. What is that? Because he looked like he was having a great time sitting over there in the chair all by himself. And I was like, "What have you done? That's different." And he was like, "It's ecstasy. Do you want to try it?" But it was more like, ecstasy. Do you want to try it? And I was like, is it gonna make me feel like you look? Because if so, then yes, I'll try that. Because he always asked me to want to try whatever he was on, and I was like, "Yeah, you don't look like you're having a good time." And that's what did it. It was the X and the
Mhm.
club scene is originally what took me down. And then got into the rave scene in Birmingham in my 20s, and just lived a wild, crazy life. I mean, we used to shut the back part of the circuit down back in the day, and we would feed the cops back there roll. I mean, like, we were wild. And then they quit making X worth a flip. I think the people that were making it were getting greedy, and they're not putting as much of the MDMA in it, and it just wasn't worth the hassle. And then one night, and I was kind of getting a little older and kind of trying to get more responsible, and my girlfriends and I would go out once a month and have girls' night out, and we would just go out drinking. Well, I was apprenticing to do hair, and so I worked Tuesday through Saturday, and all my friends worked Monday through Friday. So they slept in on Saturday and took their time and, whatever. Whereas I worked all day Saturday. So by the time we got out to the bar that night and had some drinks, went out to eat Mexican, then had some drinks, then went to the club, I was tired. I was ready to go home. I was asleep in the car. And so my friend at the bar one night was like, "Hey, if you mix some G and some of these shards together, it's just like rolling." And I was like, "Okay, I'll try it." So I tried it, and that was what really destroyed my life, was the
Mhm.
methamphetamine. And 2 years later, almost to the day, is when I hit the doors of
Mhm.
the Love Lady.
Sorry, I heard every word you said, but I had to adjust some lights. I was, I was
Okay,
just
no
right there.
problem. But that led me to the most godforsaken group of people I've ever met in my entire existence. Because I went from being like a little club kid in the clubs, strung out on the other side of town with the people that were like robbing
Mhm.
people and just stealing and, just doing all kinds of awful stuff. And that's not who I was, even as a drug addict. I was not. into stealing. I think the only thing I really stole was food from the gas station when it had been a week and I hadn't eaten. Or maybe stickers from Dollar General or something, but I really wasn't a thief. And I was like, there are people on the other side of town doing these same drugs, having fun, that aren't doing all this scandalous stuff. But I just eventually got, I was sitting in this, I was homeless and strung out and sitting at this guy's house in Adger. And I don't know, I had what alcoholics call a moment of clarity. And I looked around the room one night and I was like, okay, in real life, I would never have anything to do with you or you, and definitely not you. And I just, because I was brought up in church, so I was like, God, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Why am I living this way? I hadn't seen my son in a year. And I was like, Lord, if you will show me a way out of this, I will do whatever you want me to do. And later that day, a guy came home from court and said, everybody was like, man, what happened to court? And he was like, man, I got court ordered to rehab for a year. And I was thinking, rehab. It was like a light bulb went off. And so I asked, I was like, do you have to be court ordered to go to rehab? And they were like, no, why would you want to though? And I was like, oh, I don't want to. I'm just asking for a friend. And so I dug a little bit and went to Alethea House and got an assessment done, and then went to a woman's place in Tuscaloosa, which is actually where I heard about the Love Lady Center, and then made my way to the Love Lady Center on August 24th, 2007. And the rest is, as they say, history.
I actually found about Love Lady when I was in jail one day. One of the girls, she was pregnant at the time. I can't remember what her name. Her name was Ashley. She came in a few months before I did. I don't remember what her last name was, but she was laying in there and she was telling me that when she got out, that she was going to be going to Love Lady. And I found that out in like the summer of 2018, and I didn't make my way there until December of 2018.
Still made it though.
Yeah, I still made it.
All that matters is that you made it there.
You said something about your childhood being really strict, and I've known the people who had the really strict childhood, and they're like yourself, they're good now, but they went through a time where they were really not good.
Is that like
right?
That you can't say names on.
I wasn't going to say the names. I was going to say the group of all the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then.
Am I not supposed to be saying names?
Oh no, I'm just not saying names because I still have to see these people all the time.
It's people.
Oh, right.
But like, me on the other hand, it was strict, but it wasn't, I guess. Like, for instance, the music thing. The first song I remember hearing was I was 6 or 7. It was the first one that stuck in my head, but it was "Still of the Night" by Whitesnake. I don't know if you're familiar with that song or not.
That's why she smiled.
Yeah. I had no idea what they were singing about.
That's definitely my time period.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I was raised on, was 70s and 80s rock, a little bit of early 90s if you count Guns N' Roses. And that's what I was raised on. And my mom, I remember, it's one of the few memories that I have as a kid. I remember when I went home and told my mom, I was like, hey, I heard a song. Dad played a song for me today. It was amazing. And, oh, well, what was it? Dad, what was the name of that song? He goes, that'd be Still of the Night by Whitesnake. And Mom goes, what? He goes, what? That's a good song. And I was like, that was when I thought, I was like, maybe 6 years old or 7 years old is a little too young. But I don't know. I didn't have, I have my own addiction story and my own issues, but I wasn't wild.
No, it's because he was too busy being a professional motorcycle racer his whole life. He didn't have a chance to have fun.
Well, no. Excuse me.
Or fun.
That was fun to me.
Okay.
But no, it was a sense, I guess, of, I knew that my parents put a little bit of leeway and a little bit of grace, and I didn't want to mess that. I wanted to honor that. Yeah. I didn't feel like I had I didn't feel like I had to rebel against them, because I felt like they wouldn't like because I had friends whose parents were that way, who were very like extremely strict.
You also saw your brother getting in trouble all the time too, and you
Yeah.
didn't want to be getting in trouble like
Yeah,
him.
my brother's severely ADHD, so he would get in trouble for like painting the bricks on the house black and stuff, and which he did do, by the way. That's a true story.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier on about childhood trauma, and I'm hesitant to ask people about stuff too much because I don't want to ask you to share more than you're willing to, but if you're willing to, what you don't have to say what it was necessarily if you want to.
No, I'm an open book. I have no problem sharing anything.
I'm just trying to be gracious. I don't want to be like, tell me what happened when you were a kid.
I get it, and I appreciate that.
I'm not Dr. Phil.
So, my mom and dad divorced when I was very young. I believe it was a very bad breakup. I don't, it was the 70s back then. And so I don't think dads had as many rights as they would today. Um, they both have their own story. My mom says he never called or tried to see me, but like twice a year. He says that's not true. That he did call, that they did call every year, or not every year, all the time, but that she always said, "Oh, well, we're going here and doing this, and she can't come this week." Yada yada yada. So whatever the story, the truth, there's three sides to every story: yours, mine, and what really happened. So somewhere in that is what really happened. I To this day I don't know. I have my own idea of what I think happened, but I'm not sure exactly what the truth is. But I did not have a good father presence in my life. My stepfather, like I said, I always felt like the redheaded stepchild. I didn't feel loved. I felt criticized constantly, 24/7. I was compared to my sisters. My sisters are great because of who their dad is, and mine is just this piece of trash, and yada yada yada. And she dogged out my dad to me my entire life. And I was having a conversation with her the other day, and we were talking about my dad, and I said something to the effect of, he was raised by his grandparents, and they did not like his father, and they dogged him out to him all the time, all his life. And I said, when you do that to a child, they have no self-worth, because, and I've learned this in therapy, when you dog out a child, when you dog out a parent to a child, not a grown child, but a young child, that destroys their self-worth, because what are we? We're half of our mom and half of our dad. So if our dad is a piece of crap, what does that make me? It makes me a piece of crap too, especially if you tell me I'm just like him and I just look just like him and all these things. So the father wound, whether it was his fault or not, I still, I don't know. But the father wound was there, the mother wound is there, the critical negativity. Nothing's ever good enough. Always in trouble. Never, no positive affirmations, no positivity, no good job, no, nothing, none of that. Ironically brought up in church. And so some of the things that I've learned in therapy, like the most recent therapy session I went to, I was talking about, I had, gosh, I'm going blank. I had said something, expressed feelings, that somebody had hurt my feelings, and um, I felt like, because it upset them that they hurt my feelings, but I had to put my hurt aside to comfort them because they were upset about it. In therapy, I found out that the reason I do that, the reason I felt like I wasn't heard, was because they never heard me my entire childhood. Like, they never heard me. We all joke about how I always bring receipts, because I was never believed. I was never, my story or my feelings or my thoughts or what happened to me didn't matter. Like I said, I always felt like I was the redheaded stepchild. So I grew up with no self-worth, feeling like a piece of trash, feeling like, they don't love me, I don't love me. I know if they don't and I don't, nobody else will either. So it's taken me 52 years to learn to love myself, and I still struggle with that today, but I'm further along today than I ever have
That's
been.
good. That's
Childhood was not good for me
what was that last part?
at all.
Oh,
Childhood was not
yeah,
good for
yeah.
me at all.
That's something I'm still working on. I still don't even know what it means to love myself.
Yeah.
I really don't.
I'm working on it. I won't say that I'm there yet. I'm further down the road than I ever have been, but it takes years, I believe, of therapy and prayer and learning to really truly trust Jesus with everything. And if I believe in Jesus and I believe that he's the Son of God and that the Bible is the spoken word of God, and I believe what it says, then I have to believe that I'm not a piece of trash, and that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and that I'm the apple of his eye, and that I'm worthy of these things. And it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around it, especially because right now in this time in my life, my son is going through his own stuff and hates me at this point in time and won't have anything to do with me, won't let me have anything to do with my granddaughter. And it's because of my past and the mistakes that I made. And so while I'm trying to learn to love myself, I'm having to navigate this, which makes it that much more difficult. And it is definitely a struggle. But I'm not giving up, and I'm working on it. And if I believe that what Jesus says is true, then I have to believe that about myself. I just am to the point to where I'm just saying it until I believe
Yeah.
it, if that
Hmm.
makes any
No, it does.
sense.
I mean, the Bible says that the tongue is sharper than any two-edged sword. You can speak you can speak death or you can speak life. It's up to you which one
Amen.
you use it for. Um, so if you're speaking, this is something I've been working with her on. Uh, you keep calling yourself stupid or a loser or all these things that we say about ourselves that we don't even really think about in today's world.
Right.
It does matter because you're still hearing yourself say these things. And I'm not a
Absolutely.
big I'm not a big kind of person of like words are just as harmful as a gun kind of people, because I can let what other people say roll off my back and it doesn't bother me a bit unless it's somebody that I care about saying it. Then it matters to me.
Right.
But a stranger saying something against me, I'm like, what the crap do you matter? Go away. Um, but
Right.
saying those things about yourself, if you're saying who God says you are to yourself, then you're feeding into your own mind, your own spirit, the truth of who you are, and eventually your mind will catch up with where your heart's at. Um, that's a,
Amen.
a powerful thing. People have told, in conversations, said things to me, like, you need, treat your neighbors the way you want to be treated, love your neighbors yourself, things like that. And I'm like, you don't want to say that to me because I don't like myself.
Yeah.
I really don't like myself. I have to live with me more than anybody else, and I know what goes on up here, and it ain't fun. Um, and so
Right.
I went on this journey. Um, I don't know, it's been a while back now. Uh, of asking God who I was, and I was going through a really hard time. It was right after a divorce. And it was just, a suicidal, and it was just a hard time. And I was like, I want to know who God says that I am. And so I started asking every day, who do you say that I am? I guess I was asking his own question back to him. Jesus said, who do you say that I am? Anyway, I asked God, I was like, who do you say
Right.
that I am? You know, aside from the normal, oh, well, you're a son of God, you're a child of God. Yeah, I know that. I get that. Everybody is. Who am I specifically? And I asked that question for a long while. I don't remember exactly how long. It's probably close to a year, I guess. Um, and finally I got the answer, and it was cool how he did it. But um, just to wrap up my rambling, I what was it that did you have a moment when you felt like I'm good as far as as addiction goes, or is it still something that you push for every day kind of thing?
No, I don't struggle with it anymore at this point. I haven't struggled with it in a really long time. Honestly, I believe God delivered me. I've been through deliverance twice in my life, or in my recovery rather. And the first time was in 2010, and I really honestly believe that God delivered me from addiction. And in that moment, I did 2 sessions with this man named Joe Medina, who was Miss Brenda's mentor and had a deliverance ministry. And um, I really have not struggled with addiction in a long time. I thank God that He set me free from that, because I did struggle with it for a really long time. I mean, I relapsed and introduced the Love Lady Center to GHB.
I remember
They had
that
never heard of
story.
it. It was a whole thing. Yeah, I scooped out into the Christmas tree. It's legendary. It's a legendary story at Love Lady. Me with my mohawk and scooping out into the Christmas tree. I did not. I had been there 5 months when that happened, and then they put me downstairs, which was like restoration, but before restoration was a thing. I know one tear-filled night at the Love Lady during a Kevin Derryberry concert. It was
Amen.
after the downstairs and all of that. The Lord got a hold of me in the middle of the song, I Can Only Imagine, and He said, I was praying, and He was like, but are you gonna do it? Like, are you really gonna do it? Like, for real, like 100%, no holds barred, all the way for me, live your life 100% for me, because you've never done it that way. And I was like, you know what? Because at that point in time, I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this way, one time, all the way, with every fiber of my being, your way, and we will see what happens. And if it works, then it works. And if it doesn't work, then I gave it my all at least one time. And, at Love Lady, I felt like, my gosh, I couldn't get away with anything. Every time I did something, I got caught.
I know that
And
feeling.
and it was a huge I know, right? It was a huge ordeal, so I kind of felt like, well, if you can't beat them, you might as well join them. And that's what happened. I really honestly, in the early years, I would say it was still a thought and a struggle. I remember the day that I deleted the last dope man's phone number out of my phone. It was in 2009 or 2010. And I had been at Celebrate Recovery, at 180, and I was on leadership, and I had a small group. I was the leader of a small group, and sponsoring people and doing all the things. And it was the first night I had led somebody to the Lord, and the Lord had told me to write my mom this letter forgiving her. And it was not something I wanted to do, and we went back and forth with it. And Miss Brenda was like, "Oh, have you wrote that letter yet?" And I was like, "No, I'm not going to." And she was like, "Oh, well, enjoy no peace, because that's all you're going to have, because you're in direct disobedience to God." And I was like, well, if He wants me to do this, then He's going to have to get me there, because I don't want to, because I had disowned them in 2003. And that's what I started praying. I was like, okay, God, if you want me to do this, you're going to have to get me there, because I don't want to. And we prayed back and forth and worked on it for months. And then I had led this girl to the Lord, and it was the first time I'd ever done that with anybody. And the next day, the Lord, when I woke up, I thought, what an amazing life this is, that they pay me to come to work and pour into these women's lives. And I get to lead people to Jesus and celebrate recovery. Like, I was just on fire in every way. And He told me, when after I woke up that day, we're going to write that letter today. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I got my pen and my paper, and I prayed, and I was like, okay, God, I need you to flow through me, and your words, not mine. And in that moment of preparing and praying and doing all the things, He told me to delete that number out of the phone, and I did. And I think from that moment forward was when I knew that I knew that I knew I was serious about it at that point, because I held on to that one
Mm.
number just in
Yeah, that's
case.
a pivotal moment.
You know how we do.
That final,
Yeah,
I'm done.
that's how we do.